Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to cut and sew this beautiful corset that has a yoke and a Queen Anne neckline. And I'm going to be dividing it into two. The part one is going to be the pattern drafting and the part two is going to be the sewing parts. So if this is what you're interested in seeing, definitely keep watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if there's any part of the video you do not understand, drop your question in the comment section and I will try my best to attend to it. So without wasting much of your time, let's get started. So for the purpose of this video, I'm using a doll face and a lace, but you can use any kind of fabric that you want depending on the kind of project you're working on. So I'm going to set this aside and draft out my pattern. So from this top part, I'm going to draw my starting line, which is also going to be serving as my shoulder line. So from that point, I'm going to mark my shoulder to my bust point, which is 10.5 inches, my shoulder to my under bust, which is 14 inches, my shoulder to my waist. In front, I have 17 inches, and then my shoulder to my hip line, which is 7 inches from my waistline. And when I was done with that, I went ahead to connect all my horizontal straight line. So I'm just going ahead to label this as my bust point, my under bust, my waistline, and then my hip line. So on the shoulder line, I'm going ahead to mark my shoulder measurements divided by 2. And for my neck width, I'm marking 3 inches. So from the shoulder measurement, I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slants. Then I connected it to the neck width. So the next measurement I'm going ahead to mark is my armhole measurement divided by 2. But if you don't know your armhole measurement, you just divide your bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. And after that, I went ahead to draw a straight line across. And I'm also going to be extending it to this point, and that is going to be my chest line. So on the chest line, I'm going ahead to mark the bust circumference divided by 4. And on my armhole line, I'm going to fold my tape rule into 2. And I'll mark the middle point. So from this point, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. And after that, I'll connect from the shoulder slant to the 1/2 inch I came inward by to the point I marked on the chest line. And that is going to be my front armhole curve. So the next measurement I'm going to be marking is my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Mine is 8 inches. So when I divide it by 2, I have 4 inches. So I'm going ahead to mark it on the bust line, the waistline, and then the hip line. And after that, I'll go ahead to connect my points. So for my dart intake, I'm going to be marking a dart of 1¼ inch on both sides. But if you're working with a bust that is less than 40 inches, 1 inch on both sides will be perfect. So after marking that on the under bust, I did the same thing on the waistline. So on the hip line, I'm going to come up by 2 inches before going ahead to connect my dart lines. So using the curvy part of my ruler, I'm going to connect from the under bust to the bust point, just like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is to divide what I have here into 2. Then I'll go ahead to connect it to the bust point. Now to get my neckline, I'm going to come up by 2.5 inches, which is just 1 inch from my chest line. Then I'm going to draw a straight line across. You can decide to make it 3 inches depending on how high you want your neckline to be. So at this point, I'm going to take a dart of 1/4 inch on both sides just to avoid any form of gaping. And then I'll connect it to 1/2 inch before the bust point. And now that I've done that, I'm just going ahead to smoothen out the line just to avoid any form of a sharp edge around this area. And for my sweetheart neckline, I went up by 1 inch from the bust point because I don't want any part of my cleavage to show. But before I connect it together, I'll first of all measure my 2 darts just to make sure that both sides are equal, so that by the time I'm joining them together, one side will not be longer than one side. And when I've done that, I use my pattern master to connect it just like this. You can decide to make it higher or lower, just depend on what you want. And after that, I also connected this point to meet the armhole curve, just like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is to replace my dart intake on the armhole line. So I will measure what I have there and I will mark it on my armhole line. Then I'll also add my sewing allowance to the bust measurement. Remember, we've not done that. And after that, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus the dart intake. So I'll measure what I have here and I'll replace it. Then I will add my sewing allowance. Then on the hip line, I will mark the hip circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch for my sewing allowance. And when I've done that, I'll go ahead to connect all the points I just marked. So to get my Queen Anne neckline, I'm going to connect from my shoulder width to the second dart, and that is also going to be serving as my front yoke. And using my marker pen, I'm going to highlight my front armhole curve just to make it more visible. So the next measurement I'm going to be marking is my bust dart. And to do that, I'm going to mark what I have as a difference between my shoulder to my waist at the front from my shoulder to my waist at the back. So mine is 2 inches. So from my bust line, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. Then I'll connect it to the bust point. So go ahead and take your own measurement, and whatever you have as a difference, that is what you'll be marking here. So after doing that, I'm going to fold in the bust dart and I will pin it down. You can use a paper tape depending on what is available to you. So now that I've done that, I'm going to align the side seam using my marker pen. Now, to give our body more joining lines, I'm going to be dividing this part into 2. And at this point, you can decide to take in a 1/4 inch on the waistline if you want your corset to be snatched. But if you want it to be as simple, just like I'm making this particular corset, then you could just leave it like that. And now that I've done that, the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to come up from the hip line by 2 inches. You can decide to make it into a basque waistline, or you could just give it any shape or pattern you want to see. So after coming up by 2 inches, I went ahead to connect it to this point, and that is it for my lower part. So after doing that, I'm going to label this as my center front 1, my center front 2, and my center front 3. So label it whichever way that you want. You can make it your A1, your A2, or your A3. Just do what works for you. And that is it for my front pattern. So I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern. So looking at this, you will see that I've already added my sewing allowance. The only allowance I'm going to be adding is my joining allowance, and I'm going to be doing that when I'm cutting my pattern on my fabric. And that is it, guys. I'll go ahead and cut out the rest of my pattern. And now that I've done that, I'm going to set the front pattern aside and draft out my back pattern. So for the back pattern, you're going to need a fresh pattern paper, and I've already gone ahead to mark my starting line. So from that point, I marked my shoulder to my bust point, my shoulder to my waist. At the back, I have 15 inches, and then 7 inches from my waistline, which is my hip line. And when I've done that, I went ahead to connect all the markings I just did on a straight line. So starting from the top part, I'm going to mark my shoulder measurements divided by 2. Then for my shoulder width, I marked 3 inches, which is what I did for the front pattern. And after that, I went ahead to connect my points. So the next thing I did was to mark my shoulder slant. So I came down by 1 inch from my shoulder measurement. Then I connected it to my neck width. I'm just basically repeating what I did for the front piece. So after that, I marked my armhole measurements divided by 2. Then I connected my points. So I'm going to label this as my chest line, my bust line, my waistline, and then my hip line. So using my marker, I extended my chest line to the center back. So for my back armhole curve, I marked my bust circumference divided by 4, then the middle point of my armhole line. And after that, I went ahead to connect my points. And that is it for my back armhole curve. So on the chest line, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple measurements divided by 2, and I'm going to mark it all the way down. And after that, I went ahead to connect my points. So for my dart intake, I marked 1/2 inch on both sides. Then on the hip line, I came up by 2 inches, just like I did for the front piece. And after that, I went ahead to connect my dart lines. So on the chest line, I'm going ahead to add my sewing allowance because I haven't done that. And on the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus my 1 inch dart intake, then my 1 inch sewing allowance. Then on the hip line, I marked my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch for my sewing allowance. And when I was done with that, I went ahead to connect all the points I just marked. So now that I've done that, I'm going to be dividing this part into two. And just like I said before, if you want your corset to be snatched, then go ahead and take a 1/4 inch on both sides. But if you don't want it, if you want yours to be as simple as mine, then you can leave it this way. So to give my yoke that opening that you see at the back, I came down by 1.5 inches. And on the chest line, I marked 5 inches. You can decide to increase or reduce it, just whichever way that you want. And after that, I connected my points just like this. So for my back yoke, I want it to start from the bust line. So I'm going to place my pattern master on my bust line. Then I'll connect it to meet the armhole curve. But if you want your yoke to start from the chest line, then you connect the chest line to meet with the armhole curve. So I'm just going ahead to highlight this point with my marker so that you can see it more clearly. So looking at this pattern, you'll see that I did not add any zipper allowance. That's because I'm going to be having a lacing bar. So for my lacing bar allowance, I'm going to be marking 1.5 inches. Just depend on how open you want your back to be. You can make it 1 inch or you can make it 1.5 inches. Just note that any inches you're marking is being multiplied into 2 because the pattern is on fold. So I'm just going ahead to make a dotted line, which is where my eyelet is going to be sitting. Now on the side seam, I'm going to come up by 2 inches, just like I did for the front piece, so that both side seam can align together. So I came up by 2 inches. Then I will connect it to my length. So I'm going to label this as my yoke before going ahead to cut out my pattern. So I'm going to label this as my back piece 1, my back piece 2, and my back piece 3. I'm also going ahead to add this arrow indicator because sometimes the upper part can be somehow confusing. It's not necessary, it's just a personal thing. So after that, I'll go ahead and cut out the rest of the pattern, which is the yoke parts. So after cutting out my back pattern, this is what I have. And this is how the yoke is going to be sitting on the fabric. So I'll go ahead and cut it on my fabric. And in my next video, I'm going to show you how to put these pieces together. And that is it, guys. If you know you find this video useful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Put on your post notification bell so that whenever there is a new video up on the channel, you will be notified. So until I see you in my next video, stay blessed.